preaching is actually not for you, and it's not even just for God. Preaching arrives for the people.
That's good.
And to be present with the people. So the more that we know the people to whom we speak, the more that we have the capacity to adapt towards them. I'm Sharon Ketcham. I'm a professor of theology and Christian ministries at Gordon College.
And where are we right now?
We're sitting in my office at Gordon College on December 20th.
Well, Sharon Ketcham, as she said, is a professor here at Gordon College and has meant so much to my own experience here at Gordon. And so thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this video with me. And I'm really excited for the things we'll get to learn and talk about together.
Thanks, Benji.
Yeah.
I was his professor. I gave him a good grade. It's okay. He's good to go.
Right off the bat, do you have any advice or an exhortation for young preachers?
Gosh, just one. What's the top one? One exhortation for young preachers.
Living today, yeah.
What does it mean to preach in a way that you are with people instead of preaching just at people? How you come to recognize needs that people have or feelings that they have in order to engage with that. For example, I heard a preacher recently who came into an environment that was used to a teaching pastor, so someone who would be trying to explain and walk through more exegetically through a passage of scripture and really unfold the text. And then I heard someone else walk in and they met people in their doubt and in their fears. And it was just a different environment and different needs of a community so that you would really know what's there and who I'm talking to rather than it just being about my sermon, what I put together.
Why should the preacher know who they're talking to? Why does that even matter?
Because preaching is actually not for you, and it's not even just for God. Preaching arrives for the people.
That's good.
And to be present with the people. So the more that we know the people to whom we speak, the more that we have the capacity to adapt towards them.
Yeah, that's so good. And I'm thinking about my own journey in a lot of ways. And probably a lot of young preachers out there who love the game of preaching, but often struggle. Am I called to be a pastor? Am I called to teach? Or am I called to this? And we've had many conversations about calling. And so for the person struggling with calling, what could you say to them?
Okay. Calling. I like to think of calling as something we maybe need to turn upside down in the time and space that we're living in. It's easy to reduce calling to where I'm the center of it. What's God's call for me, or what's God's purpose for my life? Where calling is actually not about you. Calling is always to something larger than you, more than you can imagine. And so how do you not make yourself the subject of the inquiry of what's my calling, but how do you actually allow God to be the subject? Which in many ways just opens up all the possibilities of where you could serve God as preacher, as pastor, as teacher, and all these other roles. But when we reduce it to what does God have for me, I think we get lost in ourselves, and we miss being able to turn and adapt our eyes to who God is and where God's working.
Yeah. And so God could be working all the way in South Africa, or right in my backyard.
Yeah, right in your family, right in the midst of your job that's not related to ministry in the church. How might God be working there, that you're being called in that space? That's different than just thinking about your vocation and your call. But how do we not reduce calling to a conversation just about me?
Yeah, that's so good. And it's funny, I was talking to someone yesterday, and a similar understanding of call being really associated with job and vocation. But they're kind of different in a lot of ways. And so.
Yeah, I mean, some people do a job in order to carry out their calling, right?
Yeah.
And some people have the really one's not more valuable than the other.
Yeah.
But sometimes we need to get a job, Benji. Benji, get a job.
I gotta stop making YouTube videos and get a job. Yeah, that's good. Also, she taught me preaching. Not all of preaching, but I took her course and was challenged, and you told me that I would be challenged in it. And so, what's one thing you're looking for in a preacher?
That's good. That they can hold a thread of an idea all the way through what they're doing. So in class we talk about when you read something, if you don't quite understand it, you can always go back and reread.
Yeah.
But with oral communication, it just comes at you. And once it's gone, it's gone. And so a preacher needs to be someone that can put a frame together that has a thread that weaves through it, so that you have a full idea that's coming forward with people. And you have to do that pretty strongly in order for orally someone to grasp the point that you're going to make. We do a lot of talking, but not necessarily with points. Preaching has a call to have a purpose to it, that you want to have an effect on somebody in a certain way. And the more specific you can carve that out in a sermon, and the more specific you can create that frame and that thread through it, the better chance you'll have of being understood.
And it's a care for the people, not throwing a million different things at them.
Exactly.
But how do I say one thing a million different ways?
Yeah, and you might actually, and it doesn't mean that it lacks depth either. Some people say, well, that sounds thin, it would be thin, or it wouldn't have a lot of depth of trying to unfold an idea. It's actually not true. You have more opportunity to unfold the depth of an idea rather than string some things together. And we do that probably more than we realize. A lot of just things that don't necessarily relate to one another that come in the package of a sermon. How do we hold together in a strong frame with clear rationales, with a thread that works through them for an ultimate purpose of where you want to go? That's my advice.
Yeah.
For young preachers.
Manuscript or preaching without notes?
I don't allow my students to have a manuscript.
And manuscript just means
everything written down. So it would be like you're writing your whole sermon down word for word. I find that in the past 15 years of teaching students this preaching thing, if we write it down, we actually can never leave that page. Now I should be careful as soon as we use always and never and all those kind of things. I mean, some people are actually really good at their manuscripts, and they can preach without looking like they're following a manuscript.
For sure.
Most people cannot pull that off. And I find that giving people the capacity to get their sermon in their head by following an outline and talking through it and practicing it that way gives them more opportunity to be pastorally present with people when they're preaching. So I don't allow people to use a manuscript, but I would say after 15 years of teaching this, maybe I've had 3 students that I would push back to a manuscript.
Yeah.
So it's worked pretty well for people.
Okay. Yeah, it's so interesting how different traditions and preachers will use different ways of communication. And yeah, not saying the manuscript is bad.
No, but how do you free your voice to speak along the way?
And how are you present with your audience?
How are you present with? And when you write something down, that could, for most people, that has a different voice to it than when you're speaking. And being able to know like how to write something fully down out of a spoken voice is a different skill than like writing an essay.
Yeah.
So just that's what we try to work on. How do we free people's voice to speak more extemporaneously? Although, prepared, that doesn't mean not prepared.
For sure.
But be able to do that through an outline.
One of the cool things that we did in class with Sharon was talk about illustrations. And so I have 2 questions for you. The first one is why preach through illustrations? What's the purpose?
Excellent. So we do something in class where we have different types of illustrations that we use. We call it the APE, A-A-P-E, application, amplification, proving or explaining types of illustrations. And when we use the word illustration, that's anything. It could be a quotation, it could be something visual from YouTube, it could be an example from your own life, whatever they are. But you have to know why you're using them. Is it to explain an abstract concept? Is it to prove something that needs to be proven either by biblical evidence or by even a statistic in some way? Does it need to be applied to people's lives? Or is it that you're talking about something that needs to be amplified? Like like some type of story or example that opens up a vision of what this is. And they're really important because they are actually part of the teaching aspect of preaching. To know who you're talking to doesn't need to be explained or amplified or proven in one way or another. So to be very, not that I have a good illustration, that I'm excited because people are going to like it.
Yeah.
But I'm using my illustrations with intention in order to bring forward the preached word in a distinct way.
Awesome. Yeah.
Second question?
Second question. I'm putting you on the spot.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to go find an illustration and want you to give a mini thing. I don't know. Use it, apply it, sermonize it. So here we go.
Uh-oh.
I'll be right back.
I'm not sure this is a good idea.
This is a gavel. Correct, right? Yeah?
That's a gavel.
Okay.
We could ask why I have a gavel because that's a little bit weird.
That is true. Why?
Let's just leave that
Okay.
mystery.
Gavel.
Gavel. Here it is.
Here it is. That's your illustration.
So this is going to be an example of an explain illustration. So explain, it tends to take an abstract concept and make it concrete. Okay, so a gavel. So we think of gavel, we think of a courtroom.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's some type of ruling that's being made. So think about what Jesus Christ has done for us. And that a ruling that we, by grace, are saved. And it's a ruling not of something that happens because of something we've done ourselves, but because Christ rules as King.
That's good.
Rules to make grace firm. And so the judge says, the verdict is, grace is free.
So good. That was beautiful. Totally put her on the spot. She's a beast. And not only is she a professor, not only is she an on-the-spot extemporaneous.
Extemporaneous,
yeah.
Extemporaneous. Not only do I know this guy Benji,
but she also has a book that was upside down. But that just came out not too long ago. It's called Reciprocal Church. Could you tell us a bit about the book?
I would love to. Benji, this book seeks to address the loss of rising generations from the church. I don't even have to say much about that because we know churches are different places than they used to be, and research demonstrates, and our very practical lives demonstrate, that generations are not in the church as they used to be. So this church is really a theological response to that. Why is that happening? And I'm looking at the relationship between people to say, why does this matter?
Yeah.
In the end, do I have to go to be part of a Christian community? Why can't I just read my Bible and seek the Spirit and seek the things of God on my own? Why do I need this? And I'm going to challenge that pretty hard to say this is vital. What's going on between you and me to the formation of a people? And then I introduce some values of which a community would participate in.
That's awesome.
In order to become a community and not just a bunch of silo Christians.
It seems obvious from your explanation, but why should the preacher care about this book?
That's a great question, because when we're preaching, what are we doing in the task of preaching? Is it just to raise up individuals? Is it just to bring salvation for a person? Is it just to help disciple them as followers of Jesus Christ? Or is preaching also to expand upon all those important aspects of preaching? Is preaching also to form a community of people, that we are becoming something together? There's actually no such thing as an individual Christian. It doesn't exist. We are always Christians in fellowship with one another. So how does preaching join with the call that we are being formed into God's people today?
I love that. Thank you so much for doing this interview. Thank you so much for tuning in. This was really fun. And I have a special gift treat. I want to give this book away to someone.
Free.
For free. Not for $1, not for $2 or $25. No, for free. And so I'm going to leave tips, instructions on what you need to do. There's going to be one winner though. And so you could get yourself a free book and it'll change your life. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for being faithful and writing this book.
Amen. And thanks to our young preachers out there. Keep going.
Keep
on.
going. Grace and peace.